I signed the closing papers on our Willow Heights home on a bright Tuesday morning. The real estate agent beamed as she handed me the keys. "Commissioner Reynolds, you are going to love it here. The neighborhood is immaculate, safe, and perfect for raising your son." That was the goal. A fresh start for Tyler and me after 3 difficult years. My wife had passed away from cancer, and the city reminded us too much of her. We needed somewhere calm, somewhere without memories haunting every corner. The house was everything we had hoped for. Tudor style with large windows, a spacious backyard, and enough distance from neighbors to feel private without being isolated. Tyler immediately claimed the 3rd bedroom as his studio for his music equipment. I pretended not to notice the skateboard marks already appearing on the pristine driveway. He was 16, testing boundaries, but a good kid at heart. The welcome committee arrived precisely 1 day after we moved in. 3 women with identical pearl necklaces and a gift basket containing neighborhood information, baked goods, and a thick binder labeled Willow Heights Homeowners Association Guidelines. Their leader, a tall woman with immaculate silver hair, extended her hand. "Evelyn Garrison, HOA President, we are delighted to have you join our community, Mr. Reynolds." Her smile did not reach her eyes as she scanned our moving boxes. "I trust you will find everything in order here. We maintain very high standards." I accepted the basket with thanks, deliberately avoiding mentioning my position as police commissioner for the county. 20 years in law enforcement had taught me to value privacy. Besides, I wanted to be known as James Reynolds, father, not as my title. Mrs. Garrison lingered a moment too long at our doorway, her eyes narrowing at Tyler's skateboard propped against the wall. "Your son will find we have excellent facilities for recreational activities in designated areas," she said pointedly. "The sidewalks are not for skateboarding. Safety regulations, you understand." That was my first warning sign. I dismissed it as typical suburban fussiness. Within 2 weeks, the neighborhood began to reveal its true character. Tyler came home confused, showing me a printed citation that had been placed under our windshield wiper. "Violation, unsupervised minor after community hours." The citation claimed Tyler had been outside past 8:00 p.m., which was apparently against regulations. I checked the HOA guidelines, finding nothing about a curfew for teenagers. More notices followed: inappropriate recreational equipment usage, disruptive noise violations, improper yard maintenance, each more ridiculous than the last. Most disturbing was how they always seemed to focus on Tyler, despite him being one of the most respectful teenagers I knew. I noticed the patrols next. Black SUVs with neighborhood security painted on the doors, driving slowly past our house at odd hours. Men in uniformed shirts with patches would walk through our side yard, claiming to be inspecting easements. None of them looked like licensed security personnel to my trained eye. One evening, I watched from the kitchen window as one of these security officers photographed Tyler simply sitting on our front steps, talking on his phone. I stepped outside immediately. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice level but firm. The man straightened, surprised to be confronted. "Just documenting violations, sir. Nothing to be concerned about." "What violations specifically?" I pressed. He gestured vaguely toward Tyler. "Loitering, noise, the usual teenage disruptions." Tyler looked up, baffled. He had been sitting quietly, speaking softly on his phone. That night I found a red notice attached to our mailbox. "Security alert, problem residents." The wording sent chills down my spine, not because I was intimidated, but because after 20 years in law enforcement I recognized the tactics. Someone was targeting us, creating a paper trail, building justification for something more serious. I called Tyler into my office that evening. I need you to be extra careful around here. Something is not right with this HOA. Dad, they're just stuck-up suburbanites, he shrugged. No, I said, thinking of the unmarked vehicles and fake citations. This is something else. They are running this neighborhood like a private fiefdom, and they have decided we do not belong. I did not know then just how dangerous these people truly were. But I was beginning to understand that Willow Heights was not the perfect suburb it appeared to be. The targeting escalated gradually, like a predator testing its prey. A week after the security alert appeared, Tyler received his first official HOA disciplinary notice. The document looked intentionally intimidating, printed on heavy cardstock with gold embossing. It accused him of reckless behavior endangering community safety and willful disregard of neighborhood aesthetic standards. The evidence cited was laughable. Tyler had been wearing headphones while walking home from school. Apparently, this constituted deliberate situational unawareness in a controlled environment. The fine was $150, payable directly to the HOA Enforcement Fund. I photographed the notice and filed it away. Evidence collection had begun. The next HOA meeting revealed much about our situation. Held in the community clubhouse, the gathering had the atmosphere of a cult meeting rather than a neighborhood association. Mrs. Garrison stood at a podium while residents sat in perfect rows, nodding in unison at her proclamations. I sat in the back, observing. The integrity of Willow Heights depends on absolute compliance, she declared, her voice sharp with authority. We have built a sanctuary from the chaos of the outside world. Anyone who cannot adhere to our standards threatens that sanctuary. Several residents glanced nervously in my direction. I maintained a neutral expression, though internally I was cataloging everything. The meeting proceeded with disturbing efficiency. No debate, no questions. Just Mrs. Garrison issuing directives while a man in an ill-fitting security uniform stood beside her, arms crossed imposingly. After the meeting, I approached Mrs. Garrison directly. I have received several notices regarding my son that seem to contain factual inaccuracies, I said calmly. I would like to address these concerns. Her smile was cold. Mr. Reynolds, your son has been documented violating multiple community standards. Perhaps in your previous neighborhood such behavior was tolerated. Here, it is not. What exactly is your enforcement process? I asked. These security personnel, are they licensed, bonded, operating under what authority? Her expression hardened. We have privatized our community safety. Our officers are fully authorized by the HOA board. If you wish to remain in Willow Heights, I suggest you and your son learn to cooperate rather than question our methods. 2 days later, our neighbor Mrs. Chen sent me something disturbing. A video taken from her security camera showed 2 men in those same fake uniforms following Tyler as he walked home from the bus stop. They maintained a distance of about 20 feet, photographing him and speaking into radios. The footage was unmistakable. This was surveillance, not security. I confronted the HOA again, this time by formal letter. I demanded clarification on the legal basis for their security force and the targeted monitoring of a minor. Their response came in the form of a visit from Mrs. Garrison herself, accompanied by her security chief. Mr. Reynolds, she said, standing stiffly on my doorstep. Your continued resistance to our procedures is becoming problematic. This is a private community with private rules. If you cannot adjust, perhaps Willow Heights is not for you. The security chief stepped forward. We have complete authority within community boundaries. Your son has been classified as a person of interest due to repeated violations. Further monitoring is required. I looked him directly in the eyes. What agency are you with? Under what legal authority are you operating? He hesitated for just a moment. Community Protection Services, authorized by the HOA board. That was all I needed to hear. That night I made my first calls, to old colleagues in licensing and registration, to friends in the county records office, to my investigative team at the precinct. Quietly, methodically, I began building a case. The HOA had no idea who they were dealing with. I had taken down organized crime rings and corrupt officials. A power-hungry HOA president and her fake security force were simply a new kind of investigation. My son's safety, however, remained my primary concern, and these people were escalating their tactics daily. The text from Tyler came at 3:42 p.m. on a Wednesday. "Dad, there's a black SUV following me again." I had instructed him to document everything, to never confront them, to always stay in public spaces. He was doing everything right. I responded immediately, "Where are you now?" "Cutting through Maple Park, heading home." "Stay where people can see you. I am leaving work now." I was halfway to my car when my phone rang with a blocked number. I answered, already knowing something was wrong. "Commissioner Reynolds." The voice was deliberately disguised, electronically altered. "This is James Reynolds," I replied, keeping my title concealed still. "Your son is being processed for HOA violations. He is in custody." My blood turned to ice. "What are you talking about? What does in custody mean?" "Tyler has been detained under Section 7 of the Willow Heights Safety Protocol. He will be held for questioning and behavioral correction." "You have no legal right to detain anyone," I said, my voice deathly calm despite the rage building inside me. "Put my son on the phone immediately." "That is not possible during processing. You will be notified when you can retrieve him. Cooperation is advised." The call ended. I ran to my car, activating the emergency tracker I had placed in Tyler's phone. Thank God for police precautions. The signal showed him moving rapidly away from the park, heading toward the industrial district. This was no longer harassment. This was kidnapping. I made two crucial calls while driving. First, to my deputy commissioner, authorizing an emergency location track on the number that had called me. Second, to my cybersecurity team, requesting immediate access to the HOA's online portal. The tracker led me to an area filled with commercial storage units, the kind with roll-up doors and minimal security, the kind where people could easily be held against their will. Tyler's signal had stopped moving 15 minutes earlier, located in Unit 47 of Riverside Storage. I parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot, my service weapon holstered but accessible. As I neared the unit, I heard voices, men speaking in hushed, urgent tones. I peered through a small gap in the door and saw something that made my heart stop. Tyler was seated in a metal chair, his hands secured behind him with zip ties. 2 men in those fake security uniforms stood over him, while a third filmed the interrogation. "Do you understand the severity of your violations?" one asked, his voice authoritative despite having absolutely no legal authority. Tyler, to his credit, remained calm. "I would like to call my father now." "That is not how this process works," the man replied. "You will answer our questions, then sign a behavioral contract. Once you demonstrate understanding of your infractions, you will be released." I heard enough. I pressed my emergency response button, summoning real police backup, then announced myself loudly. "Police Commissioner, open this door immediately." The silence that followed was profound, then scrambling, panicked voices. "Who is he talking about?" I thought he was just some guy. Check his background now. I tried the handle. Locked. I stepped back, then kicked with full force near the lock mechanism. The door crashed open. The three men froze, suddenly facing not just an angry father but the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the county. "Step away from my son," I commanded, my badge now clearly visible on my belt. "On your knees, hands behind your heads, now." Two complied immediately. The third made a move toward a side door. I drew my weapon. That would be a serious mistake. He stopped, raising his hand slowly. I moved to Tyler, keeping my eyes on the three men. "Are you hurt?" "No," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "They grabbed me in the park, Dad. Said I was being detained for HOA violations. They have been recording everything." I cut his restraints with my pocket knife, then positioned myself between him and his captors. "Tyler, take my phone. Go outside and wait for the police. They will be here in minutes." As he left, I turned my full attention to the three fake officers. "You are under arrest for kidnapping, false imprisonment, and impersonating law enforcement. These are felony charges." The oldest of the three found his voice. "We were operating under HOA authority. We have documentation." "HOAs do not have police powers," I replied coldly. "They cannot detain citizens. They cannot restrain minors, and they certainly cannot operate unmarked detention facilities." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. "Mrs. Garrison authorized everything," one blurted out. "She runs the entire security operation. We were just following her protocols." I nodded slowly. "Then Mrs. Garrison will be joining you in custody very soon." The investigation into Willow Heights HOA became my personal mission. Tyler was safe, shaken but physically unharmed. The three men who had taken him were in custody, already turning on each other and offering information in exchange for leniency. But I knew this operation went deeper than three thugs in fake uniforms. I transformed my home office into an investigative headquarters. Charts, documents, and photographs covered the walls. My contacts in various departments provided information that ordinary citizens could never access. The picture that emerged was disturbing. Evelyn Garrison had been the subject of multiple complaints in 3 different neighborhoods over the past decade. Most had been sealed or dismissed through legal maneuvering. Her pattern was consistent: gain control of an HOA board, implement draconian rules, then use those rules to force out undesirable residents, typically families with teenagers, ethnic minorities, or anyone who questioned her authority. More troubling was her security force. None were licensed security professionals. After running background checks, I discovered 2 had criminal records for assault. One had been previously charged with impersonating a federal agent in a neighboring county, though the charges had mysteriously been dropped. They operated under a shell company called Community Protection Services that existed only on paper. The financial trail was equally damning. HOA bank records, obtained through legal channels, showed significant funds diverted to security operations, with no proper accounting. Residents were paying for Garrison's private enforcement squad without their knowledge or consent. Cash payments to unlicensed contractors, private cell phones. Even the storage unit where they had held Tyler had been rented using HOA maintenance funds. I brought my internal affairs contact, Detective Sarah Mercer, into my confidence. She reviewed my evidence with a professional eye. "This is organized criminal activity," she concluded. "Racketeering, fraud, conspiracy, false imprisonment. Garrison has essentially created her own shadow government within the neighborhood." "The question is how deep it goes," I replied. Are other HOA board members involved? How many residents know what is happening? We decided to expand the investigation. Quietly, methodically, we interviewed former residents who had moved away from Willow Heights under suspicious circumstances. A pattern emerged. Families targeted, harassment campaigns, fabricated violations. Some had left after their children were detained by the security team for minor infractions. What made my blood truly boil was discovering that Tyler was not the first minor to be held at that storage facility. Over the past year, at least 7 teenagers had been taken there for processing. Most families had been too intimidated to report it, fearing retaliation or damage to their property values. I wanted to move immediately to arrest Garrison and her entire operation, but Sarah counseled patience. If we move too soon, we might not get everyone involved, she warned. Let them operate a little longer. Build an airtight case that the district attorney cannot ignore. She was right, of course. The professional in me knew we needed comprehensive evidence for a conviction. The father in me wanted immediate justice, but Tyler was safe now, and other children would be safer once we dismantled this operation completely. We set a trap, I decided. Let them think they are still in control. Let them continue their patterns while we document everything. Sarah nodded. You realize this means putting your son back in their sights. I called Tyler into the room, explained everything, asked if he was willing to help bring down the people who had terrorized our neighborhood. His response made me proud. They cannot get away with this, Dad. Whatever you need me to do. And so our counter-operation began. Quietly, methodically, we would give Mrs. Garrison and her fake security force enough rope to hang themselves. Then we would pull it tight. The trap required perfect execution. Tyler would continue his normal routine, but now equipped with surveillance technology that would document every interaction. I installed hidden cameras around our property, focusing on areas where the HOA security frequently trespassed. My technical team provided Tyler with recording devices disguised as ordinary items, a smartwatch with audio recording capabilities, a backpack with a concealed camera. Remember, I instructed him, never provoke them, never give them legitimate cause for complaint. Just exist normally and let them make all the moves. Tyler nodded solemnly. What if they try to take me again? They will not get the chance, I assured him. We have eyes on you at all times now. The moment they approach, we intervene. Your safety is non-negotiable. It took only 3 days for the HOA to resume their harassment. 2 security officers began following Tyler to and from school again. Their black SUV would park across from our house for hours. Citations appeared daily, now for infractions so minor they were almost comical. Excessive walking speed on community pathways. Disruptive breathing patterns in common areas. They were not even trying to be rational anymore. Our cameras caught Mrs. Garrison herself directing the operation. Late one evening, she stood with her security chief on the sidewalk opposite our house, pointing and giving instructions. Their conversation, captured with directional microphones, was damning. I want him gone before the community barbecue, she said sharply. That Reynolds boy represents everything we have worked to keep out of Willow Heights, and the father questions too much. He could inspire others. The security chief nodded. We have documented enough violations to justify a disciplinary hearing. The board will vote to terminate their residency. Mrs. Garrison smiled coldly. Ensure that the vote is unanimous, no dissension. The trap was working perfectly. Every conversation, every illegal order, every fabricated violation was being recorded and cataloged. Detective Mercer converted my evidence into an official case file, obtaining judicial authorization for expanded surveillance. What had begun as my personal investigation was now a fully sanctioned police operation. The culmination came when official-looking notices were delivered throughout the neighborhood. Mandatory community disciplinary hearing, Reynolds family residency review. The meeting was scheduled for 7:00 p.m. on Friday in the clubhouse. Attendance was required for all property owners. My team and I prepared meticulously. Plainclothes officers would be positioned throughout the clubhouse. Court orders were obtained. Evidence was organized for maximum impact. I would attend not as a neighborhood resident, but in my full capacity as police commissioner. Friday evening arrived. Tyler and I watched from our window as neighbors filed reluctantly toward the clubhouse. Many looked uncomfortable, coerced rather than willing participants. "Are you ready?" I asked him. He straightened his shoulders. "Let's end this, Dad." We walked to the clubhouse together, entering just as Mrs. Garrison was calling the meeting to order. The room fell silent as we appeared. I remained in the back, observing as she began her prepared speech. "Residents of Willow Heights, we have gathered to address a serious threat to our community standards," she began, her voice sharp with authority. "The Reynolds family has demonstrated consistent disregard for our rules and procedures." A slideshow began playing behind her, showing carefully edited photos of Tyler, walking, talking on his phone, simply existing in public spaces, each labeled as a violation. "This documentation proves a pattern of behavior incompatible with our community values," Mrs. Garrison continued. "The security team has issued multiple warnings and citations. Tonight, we vote on termination of residency." That was my cue. I stood, removed my jacket, and walked slowly to the front of the room. My police uniform and commissioner's badge were now clearly visible. The room erupted in shocked whispers. "Mrs. Garrison," I said clearly, "before that vote occurs, I believe there are some facts the residents should know about how their HOA is actually being operated." Her face drained of color as I activated the projector, replacing her slideshow with our evidence. The trap had sprung perfectly. The evidence presentation lasted exactly 17 minutes. 17 minutes that destroyed the carefully constructed facade of the Willow Heights HOA. I showed video footage of illegal detentions, audio recordings of Mrs. Garrison ordering surveillance of minors, financial records proving misappropriation of HOA funds, documentation of unlicensed security personnel impersonating law enforcement officers. Throughout the presentation, the clubhouse remained deathly silent except for occasional gasps of shock from residents. Mrs. Garrison stood frozen beside her podium, her face cycling through expressions of outrage, fear, and finally resignation as the weight of evidence mounted. "Residents of Willow Heights," I concluded, "your neighborhood has been operated as a private fiefdom using intimidation, fraud, and illegal detention. Tonight, that ends." I nodded toward the back of the room. Uniformed officers entered, followed by Detective Mercer, who held official documents in her hands. "Evelyn Garrison," Mercer announced formally, "you are under arrest for criminal conspiracy, fraud, false imprisonment, and operating an unlicensed security force. You have the right to remain silent." As officers escorted a shell-shocked Mrs. Garrison toward the door, her security chief attempted to slip away in the confusion. 2 officers intercepted him immediately. "Jason Merrick," I called out, "former bouncer at the Red Lion Club, twice convicted of assault, currently wanted for questioning in 3 counties. You are under arrest for impersonating a law enforcement officer, kidnapping, and false imprisonment." The room erupted into chaos. Residents stood, shouting questions, demanding explanations. I raised my hands for silence. I understand you are shocked. You trusted these people to maintain your neighborhood, not to create a private police state. Starting tomorrow, state investigators will be reviewing all HOA documentation. The board is dissolved, effective immediately. An interim management company will handle essential services until new elections can be held. One woman stood, trembling slightly. My son was detained last year. They said he was vandalizing the park. He denied it, but we paid the fine because we were afraid of being forced out. Her statement opened the floodgates. Resident after resident came forward with similar stories. Intimidation, fabricated violations, threats to property values. The pattern of abuse had been extensive and systematic. By midnight, 5 arrests had been made. Mrs. Garrison, 3 security officers, and the HOA treasurer who had facilitated the financial fraud. The investigation would continue for weeks, uncovering more violations and abuses than even I had suspected. News of the arrest spread quickly. By the following morning, local television stations were broadcasting from Willow Heights. Neighborhood tyranny exposed ran across the bottom of screens. Former residents came forward with their stories. Civil lawsuits were filed. The state attorney general announced an investigation into similar practices at other HOAs in the county. Tyler received apologies from neighbors who had previously avoided him. Families with teenagers began letting their children play outside again without fear of arbitrary violations. The community began to heal. But healing takes time. Tyler still tensed whenever he saw a black SUV. He checked over his shoulder while walking home from school. The psychological impact of being targeted, surveilled, and detained would not disappear overnight. We held a small gathering in our backyard the weekend after the arrests. Neighbors who had been too intimidated to speak to us before came bearing food and apologies. Mrs. Chen, who had first sent me the video of Tyler being followed, brought homemade dumplings. I knew something was wrong, she said quietly, but I was afraid to speak up. My family came from a country where questioning authority was dangerous. I never thought I would face that fear in America, in my own neighborhood. I stood on our back porch that evening, watching as neighbors talked freely. Children played without looking over their shoulders. The fences between houses suddenly seemed less like barriers and more like simple boundaries. We had nearly lost everything to people who had convinced an entire community that control was the same thing as safety. "What happens now?" Tyler asked, standing beside me. "Now," I replied, "we help build something better in its place." The county courthouse was filled beyond capacity. Residents from neighborhoods across the region had come to hear what had happened at Willow Heights, and more importantly, how to prevent it from happening in their own communities. As police commissioner, it was my responsibility to address the wider implications of what we had uncovered. I stood at the podium, my uniform pressed and badges gleaming under the lights. Tyler sat in the front row, no longer the targeted teenager, but a symbol of resistance against abuse of power. What happened in Willow Heights was not simply a case of an overzealous homeowners association, I began. It was a systematic attempt to create a private enforcement system outside the boundaries of law. It was a perversion of the concept of community safety. The room was silent, every person leaning forward slightly, intent on my words. Homeowners associations serve a valuable purpose when operated legally and ethically. They maintain common areas, preserve property values, and create standards that benefit everyone. But when they exceed their authority, When they begin to believe they are above the law, they become dangerous. I detailed the warning signs residents should watch for: security personnel without proper identification or training, arbitrary rule changes without proper notification, selective enforcement targeting specific residents, financial reports that lack transparency, board meetings where dissent is silenced. Most importantly, I continued, remember that no private organization has the right to detain citizens, to enter private property without permission, or to create a climate of fear. These are not matters of neighborhood standards. They are matters of law. In the weeks following the town hall, my office worked with state legislators to create the Neighborhood Governance Accountability Act. The legislation established clear boundaries for HOA authority, required transparency in operations, mandated proper licensing for any security personnel, and created an oversight committee to investigate complaints. Tyler, having found his voice through this ordeal, spoke at several hearings. His testimony about being targeted, surveilled, and ultimately detained by unauthorized individuals was powerful. He was no longer afraid. "They tried to make me feel like an outsider in my own neighborhood," he told the legislative committee. "They used fake rules and intimidation to control people. But what they really did was teach me how important it is to stand up against bullies, especially when they hide behind official-sounding titles." I had never been prouder of my son than in that moment. The changes in Willow Heights were profound. A new HOA board was elected, comprised of residents who had opposed Mrs. Garrison's tactics. Meetings became forums for actual community discussion rather than pronouncements from on high. The security force was replaced with a properly licensed company whose role was clearly defined: observe and report, never confront or detain. Tyler and I chose to remain in the neighborhood. It would have been easier to leave, to find a place without painful memories. But running would have meant surrendering to the very fear that Mrs. Garrison had used as a weapon. Instead, we helped rebuild the community into something stronger, more inclusive, and truly safe. On warm evenings now, children play freely in the streets of Willow Heights. Teenagers skateboard without fear of arbitrary detention. Neighbors speak to each other across fences, sharing stories and building connections that make the community stronger than any set of rules ever could. I learned something vital through this ordeal. True safety comes not from control but from connection, not from fear but from mutual respect. And silence in the face of injustice, no matter how small it seems, only allows that injustice to grow. I am not silent anymore, and I never will be again.